Harry Kalaba's shocking promise: "I'll quit politics and leave Zambia if HH wins 2026. Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of the InspirAfrica official. I'm Nakash. What a week it has been here in the heart of Southern Africa. The political temperature is rising as we edge closer to what promises to be one of the most consequential elections in Zambian history. But today's story is something altogether different. Something that has sent shockwaves rippling through the corridors of power in Lusaka and beyond. Imagine a politician so confident in their prediction, so certain of electoral victory, that they would stake their entire career, their entire future in the country they claim to love, on a single outcome. Picture a man who stands before the microphones, before the cameras, before his supporters, and declares with unflinching conviction, "If I am wrong, I will leave. Not just politics. I will leave Zambia entirely." What drives a political leader to make such an audacious, such an irreversible promise? Is this the desperate gambit of a man who sees the writing on the wall? Or is it the bold declaration of someone who possesses intelligence others cannot see? When Citizens First Party President Harry Kalaba looked into the camera this morning and vowed that if President Hakainde Hichilema, known widely as HH, wins the 2026 elections, he will quit politics completely and move out of the country, he didn't just make a campaign statement. He made a blood oath with the Zambian people. But what happens when such certainty collides with electoral reality? What happens when a politician's entire credibility hinges on an outcome they cannot control? And perhaps most troubling of all, what does this tell us about the state of Zambian democracy, where opposition leaders seem willing to burn their bridges rather than accept the possibility of defeat? The stakes, dear viewers, have never been higher. The revelation came to light early this morning in an interview that has since gone viral across Zambian social media platforms and WhatsApp groups from Livingstone to Ndola. Harry Kalaba, the 48-year-old former Minister of Foreign Affairs and current president of the Citizens First Party, sat down for what many assumed would be another routine political interview. What followed was anything but routine. To understand the magnitude of this moment, we must first understand Harry Kalaba's political journey. In 2018, he dramatically resigned from the ruling Patriotic Front government, citing corruption and a drift away from pro-poor policies that had originally defined the party. His resignation letter, delivered while he was still Foreign Affairs Minister, spoke of whispers of greed and indifference making rounds in the corridors of power. That principled stand, or political calculation, depending on whom you ask, launched Kalaba into the opposition sphere. He founded the Democratic Party, later navigating complex court battles that eventually led him to establish the Citizens First Party in 2022. Throughout this period, he positioned himself as the conscience of Zambian politics, the man who chose integrity over power. In the 2021 general elections, Kalaba competed against 15 other candidates, ultimately finishing third behind President Hichilema and then incumbent Edgar Lungu. He secured a modest percentage of votes, but enough, he claimed, to establish Citizens First as a growing political force. Since then, Kalaba has been on a mission. He's traveled across East Africa, meeting with veteran Kenyan politician Raila Odinga, consulting with American embassy officials in Uganda, and engaging with European Union delegations. He's promised to end load shedding the moment his party takes office. He's vowed to industrialize Zambia. He's pledged to abolish what he calls restrictive laws. He's promised, essentially, to be everything the current government is not. The 2026 elections, scheduled for August 13th, are now less than a year away. President Hakainde Hichilema, who swept to power in 2021 with nearly 60% of the vote, is seeking re-election. Various factions of the opposition have struggled to unify. Kalaba himself withdrew from the United Kwacha Alliance earlier this year, citing a need to explore broader groupings. It was against this backdrop of electoral countdown, opposition fragmentation, and mounting political pressure that Kalaba made his stunning declaration this morning. Let me take you directly to Kalaba's words, as they were spoken during this morning's interview. The interviewer asked him about his prospects in the 2026 election. Kalaba's response was immediate and forceful. "No sitting president can win in this harsh economy," he began. "Hear it from me, HH can't win any elections. That man is a sadist, a failure and a non-performer therefore. No normal Zambian can vote for him." But it was what came next that truly stunned listeners. Meanwhile, the Citizens First Party president has vowed that in the unexpected event that President HH is voted back to power next year, he will completely quit politics and move out of the country. When pressed to clarify, to confirm that he was indeed making such an absolute commitment, Kalaba doubled down. Whether President HH uses magic or not, he will still lose the elections in 2026 as he has failed to run the country, Kalaba stated flatly. There was no equivocation, no hedge, no political escape clause carefully crafted by advisors. Earlier statements from Kalaba paint a consistent picture of this confidence. During a recent appearance on the Africa Thinks program with host Peter Clotty, Kalaba declared himself the man to watch out for in 2026. You will recall that I ran for the 2021 general elections. There were 16 competitors and I came third, and come 2026, I will be the man to watch out for, he stated. We will be defending what we have been building for the last 5 years, and definitely Zambia is counting on us to deliver leadership that will heal the divide in our country. Just months ago, speaking at a Citizens First mobilization event, Kalaba told his supporters, "We are here to conquer." His National Mobilization Chairman Henry Colombo echoed this confidence. "We are going to campaign for you and tell the people why they should rally behind CF and Kalaba. We shall even convince other members from other political parties to be part of the Kalaba wave." Kalaba's rhetoric about President Hichilema has consistently been harsh. In a statement shared with media outlets in May, he wrote, "Hakainde Hichilema's misrule and corruption-riddled government must never be given another chance to see the light of day in State House after the 2026 general elections." He's called the current administration the very definition of failure, and accused Hichilema of presiding over donor funding cuts due to corruption concerns. On multiple occasions, Kalaba has promised dramatic immediate results if elected. On the Emmanuel Mwamba podcast, he stated, "We will make sure that when we come into government, we begin to industrialize this country. There is no way we can be exporting power to outsiders and we ourselves remain without power." He pledged that Zambia would say bye to load shedding the moment we take office in 2026. These promises, sweeping, absolute, immediate, have characterized Kalaba's campaign style. But today's vow represents something fundamentally different. Today, he didn't just promise what he would do if elected. He promised what he would do if defeated. And that changes everything. So what are we to make of Harry Kalaba's extraordinary pledge? And more importantly, what does it reveal about the current state of Zambian politics? Let's begin with the obvious question. Is this confidence justified? The political landscape Kalaba faces is complex. On one hand, there's no question that ordinary Zambians are struggling. The country has experienced severe load shedding, with some areas enduring up to 21 hours daily without electricity. Economic pressures are real. The cost of living has risen. These are legitimate grievances that any opposition candidate could exploit. But several factors complicate Kalaba's path to victory. First, Citizens First remains a relatively small party with minimal representation. Despite his claims of growing momentum, the party has no members of parliament and only a handful of councillors. In recent by-elections, including one in Solwezi that Kalaba supposedly considered a stronghold, the party's performance was underwhelming, garnering, according to some reports, only a handful of votes. Second, the opposition remains fractured. Kalaba's departure from the United Kwacha Alliance, while framed as strategic positioning, further fragments the anti-UPND vote. Multiple opposition candidates, potentially 10 or more, are expected to compete in 2026, dividing the opposition vote and making it mathematically easier for an incumbent with a solid base to win, even without a majority. Third, and this is perhaps most significant, President Hichilema retains substantial support. While it's true that some voters are disappointed, particularly about load shedding and economic challenges, the Hichilema government has also delivered on several fronts. The controversial statement by government spokesperson Cornelius Mwikwa that HH alipita akale umufiashi, President Hichilema has already progressed, reflects a genuine sentiment among many Zambians who remember the authoritarianism of the previous PF government and value the relative politic openness they now enjoy. Interestingly, even some PF faction leaders have endorsed Hichilema for 2026. Robert Shabinga, one PF faction president, announced his party's endorsement of HH, citing ongoing development in many parts of the country. Whether this reflects genuine support or is a cynical political calculation, splitting the PF vote to help UPND remains unclear, but it illustrates the complicated dynamics at play. Political analysts have weighed in on Kalaba's prospects with varying degrees of skepticism. Some point to his limited grassroots infrastructure, questioning how a party with virtually no elected representatives can suddenly capture enough votes to win a national election. Others note that Kalaba's campaign style, heavy on international diplomatic meetings with figures like Raila Odinga and EU officials, but light on constituency-level mobilization, suggests a candidate more comfortable on the world stage than in Zambian compounds and markets. One analyst pointedly observed that elections to elect you as a Zambian Republican president are not held in East Africa. Elections are held in Zambia in Kanyama compound and elsewhere in Zambia. The criticism extends to Kalaba's policy promises as well. His pledge to end load shedding immediately has drawn particular scrutiny. Critics note that President Hichilema himself made similar claims while in opposition, dismissing PF's drought explanations and promising quick solutions. Now facing the same structural challenges, binding SADC power pool agreements, climate-induced water shortages at Kalaba, years of underinvestment in generation capacity, Hichilema has been unable to deliver the instant relief he once promised. One commentator wrote, "Kalaba is walking Hichilema's old road on power. Echoes are loud. He speaks like Hichilema once spoke. He dismisses drought like Hichilema once dismissed it. He claims immediate solutions like Hichilema once claimed them." This raises an uncomfortable question. If even Kalaba's critics acknowledge that his promises echo those of past opposition candidates, promises that proved impossible to fulfill once in office, why would voters trust him? But perhaps the most troubling aspect of Kalaba's pledge to quit and leave Zambia isn't about his electoral chances at all. It's about what it represents for democratic norms and opposition politics. Democracy requires a loyal opposition, parties and leaders willing to contest elections vigorously, but also willing to accept electoral outcomes and continue serving as a check on power. When opposition leaders frame elections as all-or-nothing existential battles, when they preemptively delegitimize the electoral process by insisting victory is inevitable, they undermine the very system they claim to champion. If Kalaba is so certain of victory that he's willing to stake his entire political future on it, what happens when, if, he loses? If he keeps his word and leaves Zambia, Citizens First loses its leader and founder, potentially collapsing the party. His supporters, who've been told their victory is guaranteed, may feel cheated, potentially refusing to accept the results. If he breaks his word and stays, his credibility is shattered, and every future promise he makes will be viewed through the lens of this failed prediction. Either way, Zambian democracy is the loser. There's also a historical parallel worth noting. Kalaba himself recently made headlines by declaring he would send HH straight to jail after a road accident in Solwezi. Commentators immediately drew comparisons to previous opposition figures who made dramatic threats against Hichilema, only to see those predictions backfire spectacularly. "The last fool who threatened to jail HH is now dead," one observer noted grimly. Two other clowns who threatened to have him die in jail have seen the light. The comment speaks to a broader pattern. Opposition politicians making increasingly extreme statements as elections approach, perhaps sensing that conventional campaigning isn't generating the momentum they need. So we return to our central question. Why would Harry Kalaba make such an audacious pledge? Three possibilities emerge. First, genuine conviction. Perhaps Kalaba truly believes, based on his reading of the political landscape and interactions with voters, that Hichilema's defeat is certain. Perhaps he sees patterns others miss, senses an electoral wave others haven't detected. Second, strategic provocation. Perhaps this is a calculated gambit to generate attention, to force media coverage, to position himself as the confident alternative to a supposedly failing government. In an election cycle where he's struggled to gain traction, perhaps controversy itself becomes the strategy. Third, and most cynically, perhaps it's a low-risk bet. If Kalaba genuinely believes his chances of winning are minimal, if internal polls or ground-level feedback suggest Citizens First will finish far behind the leaders, then making an absolute pledge becomes almost consequence-free. After all, if he's going to lose anyway and effectively exit the political stage, why not generate maximum attention on the way out? Which explanation is correct? We may not know until August 13, 2026. But one thing is certain. Harry Kalaba has ensured that his name and his promise will be at the center of electoral conversations in the months ahead.